The champagne flute slipped from my fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the penthouse as I stared at the pregnancy test in my trembling hands. 2 pink lines. After 3 years of marriage to Vincent Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Industries, I was finally carrying his child. I should have been ecstatic. Instead, a chill ran down my spine as fragments of another life, another timeline, crashed through my consciousness like broken glass. In that other life, I had run to Vincent with this same news, tears of joy streaming down my face. He had smiled, kissed me tenderly, and promised me the world. 2 weeks later, I found him in our bed with my stepsister Melody. When I confronted him, clutching my still flat belly, he had laughed. "Did you really think I married you for love, Eleanor? Your father's company was worth 50 million. You were just part of the acquisition." The memory of what happened next made my stomach lurch. The push down the stairs, the blood, the loss of everything I held dear, and finally the car accident that wasn't an accident at all, orchestrated by Vincent and Melody to collect my inheritance. But somehow, impossibly, I was back. 3 years earlier, holding the same pregnancy test, given a second chance I never thought I'd have. This time, things would be different. I carefully wrapped the test in tissue and buried it deep in the bathroom trash. Then I walked to our bedroom and began packing a small bag with hands that no longer shook. Vincent wouldn't be home from his business trip until tomorrow. That gave me exactly the window I needed. My phone buzzed with a text from him. "Missing you, darling. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Have something special planned." In my previous life, that something special had been divorce papers and a one-way ticket to hell. I deleted the message without responding. The apartment next door had been empty for months, but as I stepped into the hallway with my bag, I heard movement from inside. My breath caught as the door opened, revealing a man in military fatigues carrying cardboard boxes. "Sorry," he said, noticing my stare. "Didn't mean to startle you. I'm Jake Morrison, just moving in." Jake Morrison. In my previous life, I'd seen him only in passing. The quiet soldier who lived next door and kept to himself. I'd barely exchanged more than polite nods with him before my world had come crashing down. Now, looking at his kind brown eyes and genuine smile, I felt something I hadn't experienced in either lifetime. Safety. "Eleanor," I managed, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Elena Rivers." His eyebrows shot up slightly. "Rivers? As in Vincent Blackwood's wife? I've seen your picture in the business magazines." The way he said Vincent's name told me everything I needed to know. There was no awe, no sucking up. Just a careful neutrality that spoke volumes. "Not for much longer," I said, shocking myself with my honesty. Jake set down his box and studied my face with the sharp attention of someone trained to read people. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." More like lived through my own death, I thought, but instead I asked, "Would you mind if I used your phone? I need to make a call, and I'd rather not use mine." Something in my tone must have convinced him not to ask questions. He gestured me inside his barely furnished apartment and handed me his phone. I dialed the number I'd memorized in my previous life, my father's best friend and lawyer, Richard Stone. In my first timeline, I'd never had the chance to call him. "Richard, it's Eleanor. I need to see you immediately. It's about Vincent, and it's urgent." 3 hours later, I sat in Richard's office as he pushed a manila folder across his mahogany desk. His face was grim. "I've suspected for months that something wasn't right," he said. "Your father made me promise to look out for you, but Vincent's lawyers have been very careful. However, after your call, I did some digging." I opened the folder with hands that had learned not to tremble. Inside were photographs, bank statements, and legal documents that painted a picture even worse than my previous life's nightmares. "Vincent has been systematically draining your trust fund," Richard continued. "The joint accounts you signed over to him? Empty. Your father's company shares. He's been selling them off piece by piece to a shell corporation." "Let me guess," I said, my voice deadly calm. The Shell Corporation is owned by my dear stepsister Melody. Richard's eyes widened. How did you... Lucky guess. I flipped through more documents, seeing transaction dates that perfectly aligned with my memories. What about the prenup? Ironically, that's what might save you. Vincent was so confident in his charm that he insisted on minimal protections for himself. If you file for divorce citing adultery with evidence. He tapped another section of the folder. You keep everything, including the damages clause that would cost him $60 million. I almost laughed at the cosmic justice of it. Vincent's own arrogance would be his downfall. There's something else, Richard said quietly. I hired a private investigator after your call. Vincent isn't on a business trip. He's at the Grandview Hotel with your stepsister. They've been there for 3 days. The Grandview Hotel. In my previous life, that's where they'd planned my murder. Perfect, I said, standing and gathering the documents. Richard, I need you to prepare divorce papers immediately. I'll have the evidence you need by tomorrow. Eleanor, be careful. If Vincent is as dangerous as you seem to think, he is, but this time I'm ready for him. I returned to Jake's apartment to find him assembling furniture with military precision. He looked up as I knocked on his open door. Everything okay? He asked, setting down his screwdriver. Getting there. I hesitated, then made a decision that would have terrified my previous self. Jake, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I need help with something that might be dangerous. I can't involve the police yet, and I have no one else to trust. He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face again with those perceptive brown eyes. What kind of dangerous? The kind where my husband might try to kill me when he finds out I'm leaving him. Jake's expression darkened and something shifted in his posture, from helpful neighbour to soldier assessing a threat. Tell me everything. And surprisingly, I did. Not the rebirth part. I wasn't ready to sound completely insane. But everything else? Vincent's affairs, the financial abuse, my growing certainty that he'd become violent if cornered. Jake listened without interruption, his jaw tightening with each revelation. Son of a bitch, he muttered when I finished. You're right to be scared. Men like that don't let go of their possessions easily. I'm not his possession, I said firmly. No, you're not. But he thinks you are, which makes him predictable. Jake stood and walked to a gun safe I hadn't noticed before. I'm going with you tomorrow. Jake, you barely know me. Why would you... Because 3 tours in Afghanistan taught me to recognize predators. His voice was steel wrapped in velvet. And because no one should have to face their monsters alone. Something warm and unfamiliar bloomed in my chest. In my previous life, I'd been so isolated, so alone in my terror. Having someone, anyone, believe me and offer protection felt like a miracle. There's something else, I said softly. I'm pregnant. Jake's hand stilled on the gun safe. When he turned back to me, his expression was unreadable. Is it his? Yes. Does he know? Not yet. And if I have my way, he never will. Jake nodded slowly. Then, we make sure you and the baby stay safe, whatever it takes. The next morning, I returned to my penthouse to find Vincent already home, pacing the living room with barely contained energy. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his expensive suit immaculate, but I could see the predator lurking beneath his polished surface. Darling! He rushed toward me with arms outstretched, but I stepped back, letting my bag drop to the floor between us. We need to talk, I said calmly. Something flickered in his blue eyes. Surprise, calculation, then concern, so perfectly feigned it would have fooled me in my previous life. Eleanor, what's wrong? You look upset. I know about Melody. The mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold stranger underneath. Then his charming smile returned, wider than before. Melody? Your stepsister? What about her? I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos Richard's investigator had taken. Vincent and Melody in a passionate embrace outside the Grandview Hotel. Vincent's hand possessively on her swollen belly. She was pregnant too, apparently. I want a divorce, I said simply. Vincent's smile never wavered, but his eyes went arctic. Eleanor, sweetheart, you're being emotional. Those photos could be... I also know about the money, I continued. The shell companies, the sold shares, the drained accounts. I know everything, Vincent. Now the mask fell away completely. Vincent straightened to his full height, and suddenly the man I'd married was gone, replaced by something infinitely more dangerous. You clever little bitch, he said softly. I always knew you were smarter than you pretended to be. Not smart enough, apparently. I actually thought you loved me once. Vincent laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Love? Eleanor, you were a business transaction. A very profitable one, until now. He began walking toward me with predatory grace. But we both know you're not going anywhere. You're too weak, too dependent. Where would you even go? In my previous life, those words had shattered me. Now they just made me angry. Somewhere you'll never find me, I said, backing toward the door. I don't think so. Vincent's voice turned silky, dangerous. You see, I have insurance. That little accident your parents had when you were 16. Not so accidental. And I have proof you were involved. My blood turned to ice. This was new. He'd never mentioned my parents in my previous life. But looking at his smug expression, I realized he'd been saving this ammunition for exactly this moment. You're lying. Am I? Want to test that theory? Because if you try to leave me, if you try to take what's mine, I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life in prison for patricide. The room spun around me. My parents' car accident had devastated me, but I'd never questioned the police report. Never imagined that Vincent could have... You killed them. I removed obstacles, Vincent corrected calmly. Just like I'll remove you if you don't stop this nonsense and remember your place. That's when Jake stepped out of the kitchen. I think she's remembered perfectly, he said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made Vincent instinctively step back. Who the hell are you? Vincent demanded. Jake Morrison, your neighbour, former Army Ranger, current witness to your confession of double homicide. Vincent's face went white. You can't prove anything. Jake held up his phone. Actually, I can. Been recording this whole conversation. He smiled, but it was nothing like Vincent's predatory grin. This was the smile of a hunter who'd just cornered his prey. Amazing what people will confess when they think they're in control. For the first time since I'd known him, Vincent looked genuinely afraid. His gaze darted between Jake and me, and I could see him calculating odds, planning his next move. This is ridiculous, he blustered. That recording won't hold up in court. You're trespassing. It's inadmissible. Maybe, Jake agreed easily, but it's enough to start a real investigation into your parents' deaths, isn't it, Eleanor? Enough to get the police looking into all those convenient accidents that seem to follow you around, Vincent. Vincent's hands clenched into fists, and for a moment I thought he might actually attack Jake. But 3 tours in Afghanistan had given Jake more than just observational skills. His stance was relaxed but ready, and Vincent wasn't stupid enough to take on a trained soldier. This isn't over, Vincent said finally, his voice shaking with rage. Yeah, it is, Jake replied. Elena's leaving with me. You're going to let her walk out that door, and you're going to stay the hell away from her. Because if anything happens to her, anything at all, I'll make sure that recording finds its way to every news outlet and police station in the city. Vincent's gaze fixed on me with such hatred that I instinctively moved closer to Jake. You think you've won something. You have no idea what you've just started. I know exactly what I've started, I said, finding my voice again. I've started getting my life back. Jake kept his hand on my lower back as we walked to his apartment, a protective gesture that should have felt presumptuous, but instead felt like coming home. My entire body was shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off, and Jake seemed to sense it. "Sit," he ordered gently, guiding me to his couch. "I'll make coffee." "I can't have caffeine," I said automatically, then flushed. "The baby." Jake's movement stilled, and he turned to look at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Right. Tea, okay?" I nodded, watching him move around his small kitchen with the same efficiency he'd shown assembling furniture. Everything about Jake was steady, reliable, the complete opposite of Vincent's volatile charm. "Thank you," I said when he handed me a steaming mug, "for everything. I know this isn't your problem." "Eleanor." Jake sat beside me, careful to maintain respectful distance. "Look at me." I met his eyes, those warm brown eyes that had become my anchor in the storm. "Vincent threatened to frame you for murdering your parents," he said quietly. "He's stolen your money, cheated on you, and implied he'd kill you if you left. This stopped being not my problem the moment you asked for help." Tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over. "I'm so scared," I whispered, "not just of Vincent, but of everything. I don't know how to be alone. I married him straight out of college. I've never even lived by myself." "You're not alone," Jake said firmly, "and you're stronger than you think. You just stood up to a man who terrifies you and walked away. That takes courage." I had help. Everyone needs help sometimes, even soldiers. Something in his tone made me look up. "What happened to you? In Afghanistan?" Jake was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down his mug and rolled up his left sleeve, revealing scars that spider-webbed from his wrist to his elbow. "IED blast. Lost 3 members of my unit." His voice was carefully controlled. "Spent 8 months in military hospitals, another year in therapy learning to use my hand again. Army discharged me with honours and a disability pension. But I couldn't figure out who I was if I wasn't a soldier." "What changed?" "I realised that being a soldier isn't about the uniform. It's about protecting people who can't protect themselves." He looked at me meaningfully. "Some battles are fought in foreign countries. Others are fought in penthouse apartments." My phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. "You have 24 hours to come home before I call the police about your emotional breakdown and have you committed. Think about what's best for everyone." Jake read it over my shoulder and his jaw tightened. Classic abuser tactic. Isolation, threats, making you doubt your own sanity. What if he actually does it? What if he convinces people I'm having a breakdown? "He won't," Jake's voice carried absolute certainty. "Because we're going to destroy him first." Richard Stone worked faster than I'd thought possible. By evening, he'd filed for divorce, petitioned for a restraining order, and begun the process of freezing Vincent's assets pending investigation of financial fraud. The recording Jake provided was enough to convince Judge Martinez to expedite everything, Richard explained over the phone. "Vincent's been served. He's also been informed that any attempt to contact you will result in immediate arrest." "What about his threat to have me committed?" "Toothless. He'd need psychiatric evaluations, which he can't get without your consent or a court order, which he can't get without evidence of mental instability. And, frankly, after hearing his little confession, I doubt any judge would take his word for anything." I should have felt relieved, but I knew Vincent too well. He wouldn't accept defeat this easily. "Richard, what about my parents? Is there any way to reopen their case?" Already in motion, I've contacted the district attorney's office. That recording, combined with Vincent's clear motive and financial gain from their deaths, is enough to start a new investigation. After hanging up, I found Jake in his kitchen, cooking what smelled like the first real meal I'd had in days. "You don't have to take care of me," I said, though the domestic scene made something warm unfurl in my chest. I want to... Jake glanced at me over his shoulder. Besides, pregnant women need proper nutrition. How do you know about pregnant women? My sister. She had 3 kids while I was overseas. I missed a lot, but I learned about pregnancy from her letters. His expression grew soft. She used to write me about every craving, every doctor's appointment, every little milestone. Said it helped her feel like I was still part of the family. Do you regret it? Missing those moments? Jake was quiet for a moment, stirring something that smelled like heaven. I regret a lot of things about those years. But if I hadn't gone, I wouldn't have learned how to fight. And you need someone who knows how to fight. We ate in comfortable silence, and for the first time in either lifetime, I felt genuinely peaceful. Jake's apartment was small and sparse, but it felt more like home than the penthouse ever had. I should probably find a hotel, I said finally. I can't keep imposing... Eleanor. Jake's voice was gentle but firm. Vincent knows where you are right now. He knows you're safe, and he knows I'm protecting you. The moment you leave, you become vulnerable again. I can't hide in your apartment forever. You won't have to, but until Vincent's in custody or completely neutralized... Jake shrugged. I've got a couch, you've got enemies. Seems like a fair trade. My phone rang before I could respond. Unknown number. Don't answer it, Jake said immediately. But something made me swipe to accept. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was stupidity, but I needed to know. Eleanor? The voice was female, shaky and familiar. Melody? Eleanor, thank God. You have to listen to me. Vincent is... He's not who you think he is. I know exactly who he is, I said coldly. I know about the affair, the money, everything. No, you don't understand. The affair, that was... God, this is going to sound crazy, but Vincent made me do it. He's been blackmailing me for months. I almost hung up, but something in her voice stopped me. Real terror. Blackmailing you with what? With Mum's death. Eleanor, Vincent killed our stepmother. He poisoned her, and he has evidence that makes it look like I did it. He said if I didn't do exactly what he wanted, he'd turn me in for murder. The world tilted on its axis. That's impossible. Mum died of cancer. That's what we thought. But Vincent, he had access to her medical team through his connections. He replaced her chemotherapy with something else, something that accelerated the cancer. Eleanor, he's been planning this for years. Getting close to our family, mapping out our weaknesses. Why should I believe you? Because right now, he's in the room with me, and he has a gun pointed at my head. Ice flooded my veins. I could hear Vincent's voice in the background, calm and controlled. Tell her the rest, Melody. Eleanor. Melody's voice was barely a whisper now. He says if you don't come back tonight, he's going to kill me and make it look like suicide. A guilt-ridden mistress who couldn't live with breaking up a marriage. Melody. And Eleanor, he knows about the baby, he knows you're pregnant, and he says he won't let anyone else raise his child. The line went dead. Jake was already moving, checking his weapons, and grabbing tactical gear from a closet I hadn't noticed. We're calling the police, he said, his voice all business now. And tell them what? A woman called claiming she was being held hostage, but we don't know where. Vincent's smart. He'll be somewhere the cops can't trace easily. Then what do you suggest? I took a shaky breath, my hand instinctively moving to my still flat stomach. I suggest we give him exactly what he wants. The Grandview Hotel's parking garage was a monument to shadows and concrete, the perfect place for a trap. Jake had insisted on full tactical gear, body armour under his jacket, multiple weapons, and an earpiece connected to his phone so he could record everything. I still think this is insane, he muttered as we approached the elevators. Vincent's expecting me to come alone and panicked. He won't be prepared for backup. Unless this whole thing is a setup to get you both here. I'd considered that possibility, but something about Melody's terror had felt genuine. And frankly, I was tired of running from Vincent's threats. The elevator rose to the penthouse level with agonizing slowness. When the doors opened, I stepped out alone. Jake would take the stairs and come from the opposite direction. Vincent was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the door to the presidential suite with his arms crossed. He looked like he was posing for a magazine photo shoot, perfectly groomed and casually elegant. "Right on time," he said with that familiar smile that no longer fooled me. "I was beginning to think you didn't care about family. Where is she?" "Inside, alive for now." His gaze travelled over me possessively. "You look good, Eleanor. Pregnancy suits you?" "How did you know?" "I've known for 2 weeks. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the changes? Your body belongs to me. I know every inch of it." The casual ownership in his voice made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to stay calm. "What do you want, Vincent?" "What I've always wanted, complete control." He straightened and walked toward me with predatory grace. "You're going to come home with me. You're going to tear up those divorce papers and apologize for your momentary lapse in judgment, and you're going to be the perfect wife while you carry my child. And if I refuse, then Melody dies, and I make sure the investigation into your parents' deaths points directly at you. Amazing what a grief-stricken husband will tell police about his mentally unstable wife's confessions." Vincent was close enough now that I could smell his expensive cologne, the same scent that had once made me feel safe and loved. Now it just smelled like lies. "You killed them," I said quietly. "My parents, our stepmother, how many others, Vincent?" "As many as necessary." His hand came up to stroke my cheek, a mockery of tenderness. "You have to understand, Elena. I built an empire, but I needed the right foundation. Your father's company, your mother's connections, your inheritance, it was all perfectly positioned. You were the key that unlocked everything. And when you were done using me, but I'm not done. You're going to give me an heir, Eleanor, someone to inherit everything I've built. And then," he shrugged elegantly, "well, childbirth can be so dangerous, especially for someone with your family's history of weak hearts." The casual way he discussed my death, our child's future without me, sent rage flooding through my system. But I kept my voice level. "Show me Melody first." Vincent smiled and gestured toward the suite door. "Of course, I want you to see exactly what happens to people who disappoint me." The presidential suite was opulent in the way only old money could afford, all crystal and silk and antique furniture. Melody sat tied to a chair in the centre of the room, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes alert and angry. "Eleanor, don't," she started, but Vincent backhanded her casually, cutting off her words. "Now, Eleanor," Vincent said conversationally, as if he hadn't just struck a bound woman, "here's what's going to happen. You're going to call your lawyer and tell him you've reconsidered the divorce. Then you're going to transfer all your assets back to our joint accounts. And then we're going to take a little trip somewhere without extradition treaties, just until the heat dies down. And Melody? Melody is going to have a tragic accident. Distraught over breaking up our marriage, she threw herself from the balcony. Very sad, really." Vincent had moved to the sliding door, pulling it open to reveal the hotel's penthouse balcony and the 30-story drop beyond. The casual evil of it, the planning, the attention to detail, made me want to vomit. "You're insane," I whispered. "I'm practical." Vincent checked his watch. "You have 60 seconds to decide, Eleanor. Save yourself and our child, or watch your sister die knowing you could have prevented it." That's when Jake came through the balcony door. He moved like a shadow, silent and swift, his gun trained on Vincent before anyone could react. Vincent spun around, his own weapon appearing as if from nowhere, but Jake was already in position. "Drop it!" Jake ordered, his voice carrying absolute authority. "The boyfriend!" Vincent sneered, but I could see the calculation in his eyes. "How romantic! Did Eleanor promise to play house with you after I'm gone?" "She didn't promise me anything. I'm here because it's the right thing to do." "The right thing!" Vincent laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You have no idea what you've walked into, soldier boy. Elena isn't some innocent victim. She's a murderer. Killed her own parents for the inheritance money." "Funny," Jake said calmly, "because I have a recording of you confessing to that exact crime." For the first time, Vincent's composure cracked. "That recording is inadmissible. You had no right. Maybe. But it was enough to convince the FBI to start investigating." Jake's smile was sharp as a blade. "Yeah, that's right. Federal charges, Vincent. Murder, fraud, racketeering. You're looking at life without parole." "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Check your phone." Vincent's eyes narrowed, but he pulled out his phone one-handed, keeping his gun trained on Jake. The colour drained from his face as he read whatever was on the screen. "Arrest warrant," Jake explained conversationally. "Signed about an hour ago. Federal agents are probably searching your office right now." Vincent's hand began to shake, and I realised with sudden clarity that this had all been planned. Not just tonight, but for much longer. "Jake," I said slowly, "how did you know I'd need help before I even asked for it?" Jake's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "What do you mean?" "You moved in next door the same day I found out I was pregnant. You had all the right responses, all the right equipment, and you knew exactly how to manipulate Vincent into confessing." "Eleanor, who are you? Really?" Vincent began laughing, a broken sound that filled the elegant room. "Oh, this is beautiful, even better than I planned." "Shut up," Jake snapped, but his professional mask was slipping. "Tell her, Jake," Vincent continued, his voice taking on a manic edge. "Tell her who you really are. Tell her why you were sent to watch her." The pieces clicked together with awful clarity. "You're not a soldier. You're FBI." Jake's shoulders sagged slightly. "Former Army Ranger, current FBI. I was assigned to investigate Vincent 3 months ago. Getting close to you was part of the operation." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Everyone in my life, both lives, had been using me for something. My husband for money, my stepsister for survival, and now the man I'd begun to trust for his career. The protection, the concern, all of it was fake, I said numbly. "No." Jake's voice was urgent now. "Eleanor, the assignment was real, but everything else, how I feel about you, wanting to keep you safe, that's real too." "How convenient," Vincent purred. "The federal agent falls for his target. What a wonderful cover story." "You want to know what's real?" I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I'm done being everyone's pawn." I walked to the balcony door, past both men and their weapons, and stepped outside. The city sprawled below us, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Behind me, I could hear both Jake and Vincent calling my name, but their voices seemed distant. "Elena, step away from the edge," Jake ordered, and I could hear real fear in his voice now. "Why?" I turned to face them both. "You've all made it clear that I'm only valuable for what I can provide. Vincent wants my money and my womb. You want information and a conviction. Even Melody only called because she needed rescue." "That's not true," Jake said, lowering his weapon slightly. "Eleanor, I know I lied about who I was, but what? You developed genuine feelings during your undercover assignment? How original." Vincent was watching this exchange with growing interest. his weapon still trained on Jake, but his attention focused on me. Eleanor, darling, step back inside. We can work this out. Can we? I laughed, surprised by how bitter it sounded. Vincent, you killed my parents and planned to kill me. Jake, you seduced me as part of a federal investigation, and I'm supposed to trust either of you? Eleanor, Jake started. I'm pregnant, I announced to the night air. 28 years old, pregnant, widowed, well, soon to be divorced, and I just realised that I have never, not once in my entire life, made a decision that was entirely my own. Something shifted in the charged air between the three of us. Vincent's grip on his gun tightened. Jake took a step forward, and I found myself balanced on the knife's edge of choice. I could jump, I said conversationally. End all of this right now. Vincent doesn't get his heir or his cover-up. The FBI doesn't get their conviction. And I don't have to spend the rest of my life wondering who's using me next. Eleanor, please, Jake's voice cracked. Or, I continued, I could make a different choice. That's when I pulled out the gun I'd taken from Jake's apartment. Both men froze. Vincent's eyes went wide with surprise, while Jake looked like he'd been sucker-punched. You always underestimated me, Vincent, I said, keeping the weapon trained between them. Both lifetimes, you assumed I was weak, helpless, dependent. But you know what? I learned a few things from watching you. Eleanor, put the gun down, Jake said carefully. You don't want to do this. Don't I? Vincent murdered my entire family and planned to kill me and my child. You lied to me from the moment we met, used my vulnerability to further your investigation. The investigation was to protect you, Jake insisted. Was it? Or was I just bait to draw Vincent out? Jake's silence was answer enough. I turned to Vincent. And you? Do you know what your mistake was? Trusting you? Vincent sneered, but I could see the fear in his eyes now. No, your mistake was thinking I was the same broken girl you married. But I'm not her anymore. I've died once already, Vincent. I've been reborn with the knowledge of exactly who you are and what you're capable of. You're insane, Vincent breathed. Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally sane. I smiled, feeling a strange peace settle over me. You want to know what I've decided. Both men waited, tension crackling between us like electricity. I've decided that I'm tired of being everyone's victim. Jake, drop your weapon and kick it over here. Eleanor, now. Or I shoot Vincent, claim self-defense, and you lose your case. Jake hesitated, then slowly placed his gun on the ground and kicked it toward me. I picked it up with my free hand, now holding both weapons. Vincent, untie Melody. Absolutely not. I shifted my aim to his knee. I said, untie her. Vincent's face went white, but he moved to free Melody from her bonds. She stumbled as the ropes fell away, then back toward the sliding door. Melody, I said without taking my eyes off the men. There's a backup gun taped under Jake's kitchen sink. Go get it and call 911. She nodded and ran. Now, I said to Jake and Vincent, both of you are going to sit down and wait quietly while I decide what to do with you. Eleanor, you're making a mistake, Jake said. I can protect you. From whom? You're the one who's been lying to me. I was trying to build a case against Vincent. Everything I did was to make sure he couldn't hurt you anymore. By using me as bait without my knowledge or consent, I finished coldly. How is that different from what Vincent did? Jake flinched as if I'd slapped him. Because I was trying to save your life. Were you? Or were you trying to advance your career by taking down a high-profile target? The silence stretched between us, broken only by the distant sound of sirens. Melody had made the call. Eleanor, Vincent said suddenly, his voice taking on that familiar manipulative tone. You don't have to do this. We could still work together. Think about our child. Our child will be better off without you, I said flatly. In fact, I have decided something else. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the ultrasound photo I'd printed that morning, a photo that showed clearly that I was further along than Vincent knew. "This baby isn't yours, Vincent." His face went slack with shock. "That's impossible. We haven't been apart long enough for—" "We haven't been together in 3 months," I interrupted. "Not since I found out about Melody the first time. You were so busy with your affairs and your schemes that you didn't even notice your wife had stopped sleeping with you." "Then whose—" Vincent's gaze swung to Jake, who looked equally stunned. "No," Jake said quietly. "Eleanor, we never—" "No, we didn't," I agreed. "Because this baby isn't his either." Both men stared at me as I smiled for the first time in either lifetime with genuine happiness. "The baby is David Chen's, my college boyfriend, the one who tried to warn me about Vincent before our wedding, the one Vincent had blacklisted from every job in the city to keep him away from me." Vincent's face went purple with rage. "You cheating little—" "Careful," I warned, raising the gun. "I'm pregnant and emotional. My finger might slip." "You've been planning this," Vincent breathed. "All of it. The divorce, the evidence, even seducing me into that confession." "Not planning. Remembering." I smiled again, this time cold as winter. "You see, Vincent, I have a very good memory. Good enough to remember every detail of how you killed me the first time." Jake was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Eleanor, what are you talking about?" "The first time you pushed me down those stairs, Vincent. The first time you stole everything and had me killed in that car accident. I remember it all. Every pain, every betrayal, every moment of terror. But this time, I was ready." "You're insane," Vincent whispered. "Maybe. Or maybe death gives you perspective." I shrugged. Either way, I made sure to get pregnant by someone who actually loves me before I set this whole plan in motion. The sirens were getting closer now, and I could hear heavy footsteps in the hallway. Federal agents, most likely. "Jake," I said conversationally, "you want to know why I really came back? Why fate or God or whatever gave me a second chance?" He nodded mutely. "It wasn't for revenge. It wasn't even for justice. It was for this." I placed my free hand on my still flat stomach. "For the chance to protect an innocent life and make sure my child grows up free from monsters." The door burst open and armed federal agents flooded the room. But I didn't lower my weapons. "Eleanor Rivers," one of them called out, "drop your weapons and step away from the subjects." "Agent Morrison," I called out without taking my eyes off Vincent and Jake, "would you please inform your colleagues that I'm the victim here, not the perpetrator?" There was a moment of confusion as the agents processed this information. Jake slowly raised his hands, his expression unreadable. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "how long have you known who I was?" "Since the moment you introduced yourself," I replied. "David told me the FBI was investigating Vincent. He's been feeding them information for months. When I saw you move in next door the same day I found out about the pregnancy, it wasn't hard to put the pieces together." "Then why did you—" "Go along with it?" I smiled, finally lowering the weapons now that Vincent was being handcuffed. "Because I needed someone with your resources to help me get the evidence we needed. And because I wanted to see if you were different from the other men who've used me." Jake's face crumpled. "Eleanor, I never meant—" "I know." My voice softened slightly. "That's what made this so hard. I think you really did start to care about me. But you still lied. You still manipulated me. You still used my vulnerability for your own purposes, even if those purposes were noble." Vincent was being dragged away, but he managed one last venomous look at me. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you've started. I have friends, Eleanor. People who will make sure you pay for this." "No," I said calmly. "You had business associates, people who profited from your schemes. But now that you're going down, they'll cut ties faster than you can imagine. Predators don't have loyalty, Vincent. They only have opportunity. As Vincent disappeared through the doorway, still shouting threats, Jake approached me slowly, his hand still raised. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now I disappear," I said simply. "I have a new identity prepared, money in accounts Vincent never knew about, and a man who loves me waiting in a place where none of this can touch us. David, the only man who ever loved me for who I am, not what I could give him." Jake nodded slowly, understanding and pain warring in his expression. "Eleanor, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. About the lies, about using you, about all of it." I studied his face, seeing genuine regret there. "I believe you, but that doesn't change anything." "I know." Melody appeared in the doorway, escorted by 2 agents. She looked shaky, but alive, and relief flooded through me. "Melody," I called out, "are you all right?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry. About everything. About Mum, about Vincent, about—" "It's over now," I said gently. "Vincent can't hurt any of us anymore. But the things he made me do, the lies I told about you, were survival. I understand that now." I walked over and hugged her, feeling the last knots of resentment finally loosening. We both did what we had to do to survive him. One of the federal agents approached me. "Miss Rivers, we're going to need a full statement, and Agent Morrison will need to be debriefed about his undercover assignment." "Of course." I looked around the opulent hotel suite one last time, then at Jake. "Agent Morrison did excellent work. His investigation provided all the evidence you needed to convict Vincent Blackwood of multiple federal crimes." Jake's eyes widened slightly at my formal praise, but he said nothing. "However," I continued, "I'll be unavailable for follow-up interviews. My lawyer will provide any additional statements needed for the prosecution." "Ma'am, you're a key witness. You can't just disappear." "Watch me," I said pleasantly. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of a small villa overlooking the Mediterranean, my hand resting on my rounded belly as I watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. David came up behind me, wrapping his arms around me and resting his chin on my shoulder. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. I leaned back against his solid warmth, feeling our baby kick in response to his father's voice. "About leaving everything behind? About disappearing? About letting Vincent rot in federal prison while I live in paradise?" "Any of it?" I was quiet for a moment, considering. Vincent had been sentenced to life without parole for multiple murders, including my parents and stepmother. Jake had testified at the trial, his voice carefully professional as he detailed the evidence they'd gathered. Melody had entered witness protection and was reportedly doing well in therapy. And me? I was free, truly free for the first time in either lifetime. "No regrets," I said finally. "Well, maybe one." "What's that?" I turned in his arms, smiling up at the man who'd loved me enough to help fake my death and disappear with me to start over somewhere new. "I regret that it took dying once to figure out how to really live." David laughed, the sound rich and warm in the gathering twilight. "Well, they do say the second time's the charm." "In that case," I said, standing on my toes to kiss him, "I'm looking forward to our second chance at everything." As the stars appeared overhead and our baby moved restlessly in my belly, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete and total peace. Vincent was gone. Jake was just a memory, and I was finally, truly home. But just as I was about to suggest we go inside, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. David and I had been very careful about security. But something made me look. You can run, but you can't hide forever. Some debts follow you across lifetimes. A friend. My blood turned to ice as I stared at the screen. David felt me tense and looked over my shoulder. Eleanor, what is it? I showed him the message, watching his face go pale. David, you said Vincent was definitely in prison, that all his associates had been rounded up. They were. The FBI traced everyone connected to his organisation. Another message appeared. Check the news, little sister. With trembling fingers, I pulled up a news website. The headline made my knees weak. Federal prisoner Vincent Blackwood found dead in cell. Apparent suicide. That's impossible, David breathed. He was in maximum security, constant surveillance. I scrolled down, reading details that made my stomach churn. Vincent had supposedly hanged himself with bedsheets, but there were no security cameras in his cell at the time. A technical malfunction. No guards had checked on him during the window when he died. My phone buzzed again. Turns out dear Vincent had one last card to play. A dead man's switch. Very dramatic, don't you think? Now that he's gone, all his secrets come out, including where his beloved wife disappeared to. Eleanor, we need to leave, now! David was already moving toward the house, his face grim with the same military efficiency Jake had shown. But I was frozen, staring at the final message that had just arrived. You remember how this story ends, don't you? In both lifetimes, you never get to keep the happy ending. But don't worry, this time I'll make sure the baby survives. After all, Vincent's child deserves better than a murderer for a mother. The signature at the bottom of the message made my blood turn to ice water. Love, always, Jake. As David shouted my name from inside the villa, and the sound of helicopters began to echo across the peaceful Mediterranean night, I realised with horrible clarity that I had been wrong about everything. Vincent hadn't been the real monster. Jake had been playing a much longer game than any of us had imagined. And somehow, impossible as it seemed, he knew things about my previous life that I'd never told anyone. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing my terror, and I pressed both hands to my stomach as the helicopters grew closer. I'm sorry, little one, I whispered to my unborn child. I thought I could protect you this time. But as searchlights began sweeping the hillside and David burst onto the balcony with a gun in his hand, I realised that some monsters are patient enough to let you think you've won before they show you how the game really ends. And some second chances are just elaborate traps designed by predators who understand that hope makes the perfect bait. The story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning.